All right, welcome back everyone. What I'd like to do now is just walk through the very first practice assignment. So all of the assignments you're going to be doing throughout the boot camp are basically going to follow the same basic pattern. Okay, so we'll walk through this one, and just so you, in case you don't know how to zip a file or anything like that, we'll walk through all of the steps. Okay, so what I like to do is just go to the bottom of the assignment. I mean, if you need to read through all these, the more fine details, you can. But I'm just going to go down to the checklist. Okay. And this checklist is here for you to keep track of where you are in the assignment. So if I click this box or if I click anywhere, it's going to show that this step has been done. Okay. So just to make sure that your assignments are complete, we do review your assignments. So if it's not complete, you will get it sent back to you. And this is just a way for you to go through, make sure everything's complete so you don't have to go through over assignments you've already done. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these steps. So download and install VS Code. I've already done that. I have another video where I walk through that installation. So if you look back at our schedule, that video is right here. I haven't done it yet, but it will eventually be in the lecture recordings as well. But the video here is if you need help installing Visual Studio Code, it's right there. Okay, so we've done that. So I'm going to click at that. We've done it. Okay. The next step is to create a new file in VS Code. Okay, so I will often make the mistake of calling a folder a file and a file a folder, and that's a bad habit. That basically the file, or the folder, the little icon like this right here, that's a directory or a folder. Okay, I've my whole life have called these things files, but they're not files, they're folders. Okay. We put files inside of those folders. Okay. So we're going to go into Visual Studio Code and make a new file. Okay. So to get to Visual Studio Code, if you can do the same thing in Mac and Windows. You can put a link to it in your taskbar, or I forget what they call it on Mac. I think it's a Launchpad or something like that. So just you can put it here. You can make it, however you get to it. You're going to open up Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to click that. For some reason it didn't open. There we go. So I'm going to open it back up, and Visual Studio Code will open to the last project you were working on. Okay, so the last thing I did was create our programming basics directory. Okay, so to add a file, you're going to hover over this first line, and you notice that these little buttons come up. Okay, so to create a file, hover over this one, and will say new file. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can right click, and if you wanted to add a folder, you could come down here and add a folder. But I'm just going to do new file. Okay. So that's the file. Let's go back to the instructions, and they want us to use the .html file extension. And file extensions are basically, you've seen them before. If you see like a .png or a .doc, that's a doc, right? .jpeg or GIF or GIF or however you pronounce it. Those are all file extensions. And just by putting that file extension on isn't necessarily going to make that file of that type. But in our case, we're making the files from scratch, right? So we are deciding, hey, this file is going to be an HTML file, okay, or a JavaScript file, or whatever type file we're making. Okay, so we're going to create, and you don't have to use this naming convention. You don't have to put your last name, underscore, and all that stuff. If you want to, you can, but that's not required, okay? The important part is we want to add the .html extension, okay? So if I go back into Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to click this button again to show you how to make a new file. So I am just going to call this index, okay? That's a special name in programming. We'll talk more about that later, but we're generally going to call the first file that we make an index file. So I'm going to say index.html, okay? And you'll notice that this little HTML icon appears here. I have an extension that does that, but basically now Visual Studio Code knows that this is an HTML file. And that will then allow me to use shortcuts and different helpers that are available in Visual Studio Code just by virtue of putting this .html on here, okay? So we'll get into all the shortcuts later, but wait, do they want to, yeah, so HTML, and they want us to add hello world, okay? So real simple, we'll go back in here and just type hello world, okay? And that's just tradition. Your first code you write always says hello world in whatever programming language. All right, so let's see where we're at. So we've created a new file, we added hello world. Now we need to save the file. Okay, so if I go back and let me just hit enter to show you what happens. So whenever I make a change to a file, you'll notice that this little white dot appears. That indicates that this file has not been saved. Okay, so we need to basically go in, you can go into the file, same as like a word processor, you can save it, or you can use the shortcut. Okay, every developer knows a handful of shortcuts that they use, so that way I don't have to go and use. Every time you take your hands off the keyboard and go to the mouse, it takes time, right? So you want to learn as many keyboard shortcuts as you can. And for save, it's just Control S. Okay, so now that there's an X here, we notice that that indicates that this file has been saved. Okay, so now if I go back, I've saved the file. Next thing we need to do is zip the file. Okay, so if you've never zipped a file, I think you can do it from here. Oh yeah, okay. So I thought you could do it here. From here you can't. So we're gonna right-click the file, and we're going to go down to where it says Reveal in File Explorer. Okay, this option is available on Mac as well. It doesn't say Reveal in File Explorer. It says something similar to that, okay? So Reveal in File Explorer, that will open up my system's File Explorer, okay? So if you're on Mac, it's gonna be the, I forget what it's called, Finder. Okay, so once we're in here, we can then go to, this is the file we just made. So if I right-click it and go down to where it says Compress to Zip File. Okay, so again, hover over the file, right-click, go down to Compress to Zip File. Okay, and that will automatically create this .zip folder. Actually, so it's actually not a file. It has a folder icon. Okay, you can just leave the name the same as the original file. It doesn't matter. Okay, just leave it as index.zip. Okay, hit enter, and that's it. Okay, so now if I go back to, and actually I'm just gonna make this smaller. I'm going to close out Visual Studio Code and go back to the platform. So now the platform has, if you scroll down further, so let me just finish the check mark. So we zip the file. Now this is where at this point we need to submit the file. Okay, so if you scroll down further, I've already done this, so let me delete the one that I have. Yes, I want to delete it. So you'll see this, right? So you can either take the zip file, not the original file, but the zip, and you can drag it into this area. Oops. Drag it into this area. All right, so that's letting me. There we go. Okay, so this is a late submission, and it's saying I'm late because I'm late, I guess. So just click confirm. And if I scroll back down, there it is. And yours shouldn't say out of schedule. It's in that because I'm an instructor, right? So I'm not signed up for the course officially, okay? The other way to do this is if I can just throw this away, okay? And like that's a good point. If you're not set, it's not set in stone. Once you submit a zip, if you forgot to do something, you can always delete it, go back, make any changes, and resubmit, okay? But the other way to submit is I can click on Browse, and that will open my File Explorer, and you can see those are the videos I've done. So if I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm basically just going to go through, navigate through my file system to find that zip file I just made. So it's in Programming Basics, and it's right here. So once I get to the file that I want to submit, I just click Open, and it'll do the same thing. Okay, so either one you prefer. If you want to navigate through the file system, drag and drop, either one's fine. All right, and that is it. I hope that helped, and I will see you in the next video.